Okay. I'm a Halo Hazelton from the 403 to the HAZ. This is Mr. Nelson. It's been a while since I've made a video, and I'm already scrambling for my writing utensils. Gee whiz, this is one I've been meaning to make for a long time because it takes us right back to the beginning of where I approach grade 10 from, which is making sure we understand how to work with integers. Integers being whole numbers, negative, 0, and positive. So integers being negative infinity all the way to, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, nice clean round whole numbers, negative to positive. And so why do we need to deal with negative numbers? Well, we have situations in the world where we need to represent the opposite of, well, for example, the opposite of above sea level is below sea level. So we can use negative numbers to represent depths below sea level. Temperatures, we need to be able to represent temperatures that are below 0 degrees Celsius or cold. I'm sure we could have created a system where we have temperatures from, 0 all the way to something high, assuming we didn't use negative numbers, but negative numbers just make a representation much easier. Money, how do we represent when somebody's in debt? We use negative numbers. So there are a tremendous amount of applications, and as you go further and further into math and science and physics, they stick around and they're here for good. So we, in order to be successful in math, we need to know how to use them and how to manipulate them. So I am going to teach you how I like to teach integers because I think it's pretty easy to visualize and everything. So we are going to start, and hopefully this won't be a terribly long video, but we're going to start with the concept of adding and subtracting integers, okay? Now, we are going to imagine that positive integers are going to be green. I'm just going to use, that's going to be my symbol for a positive integer. So right here I have positive 2, and negative integers, I am going to use that. So that's negative. Now, what happens when I introduce, for example, a positive integer, so positive 1, what happens when I introduce it to a negative integer? Negative 1. Well, they are attracted to each other, they fall in love, they find out they have the same veterinarian, and they elope together. So when a positive integer meets a negative integer, they pair up and they essentially become 0. A positive and a negative become 0. Just think of a thermometer, for example. If I was at positive 1 degree Celsius and I drop, I meet a negative and I drop by 1 degree Celsius, I'm going to be at 0 degrees Celsius. So when a positive and a negative meet each other, they elope, they run away together, and they become 0. That's an important thing to know about integers. A 1 plus 1 and negative 1 together make 0. And there's also a language to integers. I'm kind of getting all over the place. Let me take a sip of coffee because it's early, and we will reel it in. So let's just jump right into what this looks like. So let's go with some stuff we already know how to do. Let's say I have a positive 1, and I add another positive 1. Okay, so we can see now that we have to basically gender our numbers. This is the gender of this. It's a positive 1, and this is a positive 1. I did not assume the gender. It told me the gender, okay? So, in this case, I have a positive 1, and I have to read out. I have to read. This actually reads like a sentence, this right here. I have positive 1, and I add, this is telling me that I'm going to add Positive means I'm going to add, you knew this, and I add another positive one. So if that's the case, this is what I do. I just do what it tells me. I have positive 1, and I add another positive 1, which tells me, I have positive 2. Now what happens if I do that with two negative integers? What if I say I have negative 2 and I add negative 1? Well, this is, again, how we read the sentence. I have negative 2 and I add negative 1. So, I have negative 2 tokens and I'm going to add another negative 1 token. How many tokens do I have now? I have negative 3. So this becomes, this first one was positive 2, and this one's going to be negative 3. Really important when we're doing adding and subtracting that we actually do read the equation as a sentence, because that's going to really give us a lot of hints of what we need to do. So, this case I was adding two positive integers together, this case I was adding two negative integers together. Okay, so these are pretty easy cases. So what happens now when I do something like this? So what happens if I had positive 2 and then I add negative 3? Well, I just do what it tells me to do. So I have. So I'm actually going to write the sentence that I'm going to write. I'm going to read every time. It's going to be I have. What do I start with? I have this, and then this is where I'm going to decide if I'm adding or taking away or subtracting. And I, add or subtract, and then whatever it is. Okay? So in this case, I have positive 2, and I add, so I have positive 2 tokens. And I'm going to add 3 negative tokens now. So I'm going to add 3 negative tokens to the mix. Okay? Now, what do I know? I never will have two different genders in an answer. It's always going to result in one, either positives or negatives. But what I know is when a positive meets a negative, they elope together. So in this case, I'm going to pair these off when I can. So I have a pair right here that are going to become 0. They're going to cancel each other out, or elope. And I've got another pair, and they become 0. So what am I left with in this case? When these guys move to Paris and start eating baguettes beside La Seine, I'm going to have just one negative. So the answer here is negative 1. Okay, so let's try a different example. Negative 1. That was negative 1. So what if I do this? Okay, I'm going to read out my mathematical sentence. I have negative 3 tokens. 1, 2, 3. And I add, and I'm going to add 2 positive tokens. I'm going to add 2 positive tokens. And again, I have 2 different signs, 2 different genders, 2 different types of tokens here. So I know that I'm going to probably have to pair some off. So I have a pair here, they fall in love, and I've got a pair here. And they cancel out, I can completely erase them, and I'm left with a negative 1. So this becomes as well, negative 1. Okay? So if I can read my problem like this, it's going to make things quite easy. So let's try just a couple more here, just to make sure that we understand this. So what if I had negative 2, and right now all I'm doing is adding, so we're going to see what happens when I start subtracting. But let's do a couple more for adding. Negative 2, and I add -3, try that one, +2, -5, and -3 plus -1. Okay, so let's read each of these out, and let's make sure that I know that I want to know what's happening. Equals, equals, equals. So what's happening here? I have 2 negative tokens. Just draw that out. I've got 2 negatives. And I add 3 negatives. So I'm going to add 3 negatives. And I'm left with -5. I have just one gender in my answer. That's exactly what I want. Just negatives. If I had any positives here, I would have to cancel them out. So the second one here, if you read it out, I have 2 positives. And I'm adding 5 negatives. I'm adding 5 negatives. I'm going to add 5 negatives. And I'm noticing that I have 2 different signs in my answer. So I know that I'm going to have to do some canceling. So this guy is going to cancel here, then this guy's going to cancel with that, which means that I am left with 3 negatives, and therefore that is my answer. 1, 2, 3. And finally, I have 3 negatives. 1, 2, 3. And I'm adding 1 negative. And I only have 1 gender in my answer, so the answer here is -4. Okay? We have just learned how to add integers. And the more we practice this, and I'm going to show you a trick after we kind of learn the visual technique here. I'm going to just teach you a little bit of tricks around what we can do when we look at these things to help us figure out the answer. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Let's do some subtraction now. And for subtraction, we're going to use the same sentence here, okay? So let's do a couple examples. I have -1. Let's say. Okay, -3, and I take away 2. So subtraction's a little bit, it gets a little bit more, ever so slightly more complicated. So in this example, and let's try so this first one, I'm going to read it the same way. I have 3 negative tokens. 1, 2, 3. And I'm taking away, that's what the subtraction means. I'm taking away 2 negatives. So I'm going to take away now 2 negatives. You're coming with me. That means that I am left here with 1 negative. That's my answer, okay? Down here, I have 5 positives, okay, and I'm taking away 2 positives. So I'm just going to take away 2 positives, and I'm left with +3. Okay, pretty straightforward. But now what happens in the situation where if I have -3 and it wants me to take away positives, because I don't have positives here. Let's see what that looks like now. So let's say I have 5, and it wants me to take away -2, or I have -3, and it wants me to take away +1, for example. Okay, so this example here, I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to read it. I have 5 positives. And I want to take away, and I take away 2 negatives. I don't have any negatives. What am I going to do? I don't have negatives. Well, I may not have negatives, but I have an endless supply of couples or zeros. I have an endless supply of zero. And what does a zero look like? A zero looks like this. This here, just this here, this is zero. A positive one and a negative one. This is zero, but it's a kind of strange way of showing it. So right now, this total number that I'm actually representing here, where I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positives and 1 negative, I'm actually showing positive 5 because this cancels out as 0. So this number here, even though it looks like it's more than positive 5, it's still positive 5. And if I add another 0 pair, if I'm adding another 0, this whole number here is still positive 5. And I can add unlimited 0 pairs. These are called 0 pairs, and I have unlimited. I could write this forever. I'm just going to write 3 for now, but these are called 0 pairs. And they're very, very valuable. So 0 pairs are going to help me now to take away negative 2. So I have positive 5 and I need to take away negative 2. Well, I can take away negative 2 from a 0 pair. I can create negatives to take away from by creating 0 pairs. I'm only going to need 2 0 pairs because I only need to take away 2 negatives. And I'm going to take away those 2 negatives, and then I am going to be left with now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 positives, which is, in fact, the answer to this question, positive 7. This is how we do it visually. How about down here? It's going to be the same practice. I have negative 3, and I take away a positive 1. I don't have any positives. What do I have, though? An unlimited supply of 0 pairs. And I need to take away 1 positive, so I'm going to only need 1 0 pair. And I'm going to go ahead, take this away, and voila, I am left with negative 4, which is the answer to negative 3 minus a positive 1. So when it asks me to take away a number or a token, take away something that I don't have, I'm going to have to use a 0 pair to create enough of that positive or negative to take away from. Let's do 2 more examples, and then I'm going to show you the shortcut for solving this, for solving these types of problems. So a couple more. Let's say I have positive 5, and I take away positive 6, and negative 4 minus positive 3. Okay, so here I have positive 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I take away 6 positives. Well, I only have 5 positives to take away from. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It wants me to take away 6. I need to take away 1 more. Well, I may not have any more positives to take away from, but I have an unlimited supply of 0 pairs. That's 0. I haven't changed the number here. I've just added 0. And now I'm going to take away my last positive that it wants me to take away. And I am left with, yes, negative 1. Okay? And finally, I have negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I take away positive 3. Again, I don't have positive 3. What I have is an endless supply of 0 pairs. So I am going to create 3 0 pairs because I need to take away a positive 3. There's 3 0 pairs. Now right now, this whole number you're looking at is still -4 because these all cancel out. So I haven't done anything technically illegal. I've done something kind of cheeky, but not illegal. And now I can take away my +3. 1, 2, 3, which leaves me with -7. Okay? So that is what's going on when we are doing integers. Now some people like to use a number line, and that's fine. I'm just going to teach it this way. If you don't like this method, if you prefer to use a number line, go find somebody on YouTube that does it better than me, okay, with the number line. I will be slightly offended, but I cry myself to sleep every night as it is, so it's not going to be a big deal. If you're noticing my fingernails are painted, it's because I did drag queen karaoke at the Old Town Bar here recently. Nobody needs to have seen what happened that night. So, in this case, what we can do now is when we are doing these problems, as a shortcut, we can start looking at these two signs that occur in the middle. Okay, and now, not always will a positive number be clearly indicated that it's positive. So we assume if there's no number, if there's no sign beside a number, we assume it's gender. Okay, we assume it's positive, which is, I mean, just so 1990, but that's what we do. So what does that mean? That means that sometimes you might see a problem like 5 minus, +2. And this is just assumed a +5. So we need to know that we can do that. If no sign is indicated, assume the gender. So in this case, we have a negative and a positive in the middle. There we have a negative and a positive in the middle as well. Here's what we need to know. When we have a negative and a positive beside each other in here, we can replace that with one big negative. Okay? When we have a positive and a negative in the middle, so if this was a positive, this was a negative, we can also replace that with a negative. If, however, we have two negatives in the middle, which we'll show, two negatives, same signs, we can replace that with one big positive. And if we have a positive and a positive in the middle, in here, we can replace that with a positive. So, that means that this question here, I could rewrite as +5 minus 6. Okay? And I can imagine that basically I have two armies. I have an army of positive soldiers and an army of negative soldiers. And in this case, this just tells me, okay, we're going to war, and I've got 5 positive soldiers against 6 negative soldiers. A positive soldier and a negative soldier kill each other. And so in this case, who has the bigger army? The -6 has the bigger army. By how many soldiers? By 1. Therefore, I can just tell right away, I'm going to be left at the very end of this gruesome battle, I'm going to have 1 negative soldier left. Okay? +5 minus 6. How about down here? Well, I have -4 soldiers, and this becomes a big negative, and I have also -3 soldiers. So in this case, there's not going to be a battle because all the soldiers are on the same team. So I just know that my soldiers, my army got bigger. My negative army got bigger, and it became 7 soldiers deep. Okay? Do a couple more examples here. So let's say I have +2, -3, and -4, and okay. Okay. So I have positive 2. 1, 2. And I take away negative 3. Again, I don't have any negatives to take away from, so I take away from some 0 pairs. Okay, and I can take away now negative 3. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. That's confusing, but I do that. I'll just use black, bad. And I'm left with positive 5. Now if I use my trick here, now you can tell if the signs are the same, positive, signs are different, negative. Signs here are the same, I know automatically I can replace that with one big positive. So I rewrite this as, I've got positive 2, and I add 3. So in this case, I have an army of 2 positive soldiers, and I also add positive 3 soldiers. So now my army of positive soldiers has increased to 5. How about down here? I have negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I take away positive 2. And again, I don't have any positives to take away from, so I'm going to have to add 0 pairs. And I take away positive 2, goodbye, goodbye, and I'm left with negative 6. Now if I did this, using this trick here, I would notice, okay, I've got different signs in the middle here. Therefore, I can replace that with one big negative, and I get negative 4 minus 2. And I notice, okay, I have an army of 4 negative soldiers that just met up with an army of 2 negative soldiers. My army of negative soldiers is just getting bigger. And now I have negative 6 soldiers. Okay, they combine together. Couple more examples here, and I will leave you to practice on your own. So let's say I have positive 4, and that, and let's say there we go. Okay, here I have 4 positives, and I'm taking away 2 positives, which should be easy enough to do. I take away 2 positives, and I'm left with positive 2. Now if I just use my quick little method here, I'd say, okay, my signs are different, which means I have 4 positive and a big minus 2. Now I have an army of 4 positive soldiers bumping into an army of 2 negative soldiers. They fight to the death. Each positive soldier kills a negative soldier. Whose army is going to be left over at the end? Yes, my positives are going to be left over. And there's going to be, how many of them left over? 2. 2 positive soldiers are going to be left over after they go to battle. And down here, I have negative 3. And I'm taking away negative 2. So I'm taking away negative 2. I have negatives to take away, and that's going to leave me with negative 1. And if I went through my process here, I would notice I've got 2 negatives down here, which are going to become a positive. So I have negative 3, who bumps into, so I've got an army of 3 negative soldiers that bumps into an army of 2 positive soldiers. Whose army is going to be left over at the end? The negative army. And they're going to have 1 soldier left. Okay, this is how we do integers. We have to just be able to see what is going on here. And this little trick here that we drew for remembering what's going on in the middle, this relationship between negative, positive, positive, negative, it's also going to come up when we start doing multiplication and division, which will be the next video. But for now, just go ahead and practice this stuff, see how it goes, and we'll go from there. Okay, thank you.